This is BBC News. I'm Daniela Ritorto. Let's recap the headlines. Iraqi government forces have advanced towards the city of Tikrit, pushing back Islamic State militants. And IS has looted and demolished the remains of the ancient city of Nimrud. The UN has called it a war crime. Well, we're going to stay with that story, what's going on with those antiquities in Iraq, and speak to Professor Akbar Ahmed. He is Chair of Islamic Studies and Professor of International Relations at the American University in Washington. He was also formerly the Pakistani High Commissioner in London. Thank you very much for your time today in Washington for us. What was your reaction when you saw this destruction once again?
Well, it was horror, it was outrage. It reminded me of the act of the Taliban in destroying the statues in Bamiyan. It's very difficult to make rational sense of acts as outrageous as what's happened at Nimrud or in Bamiyan, and therefore we need to look for what is motivating the ISIS right now to be doing what they're doing. And I really see several strands in this, Daniela. Number one, you see the argument that this is a religious act. For Muslims like the literalists who would see the Quran or their faith as a literal interpretation of the holy text. This comes down from the Abrahamic tradition, the acts of Abraham, the acts of Moses, in looking at graven images and rejecting them, the second commandment to reject idolatry. There's then the act as in an act of desperation. You have the Iranian-led troops leading the Iraqi army, again dominated by Shia soldiers, into Tikrit, and this is causing great fear among ISIS followers that this may be the beginning of the end, as it were, and there may be a bloodbath against the Sunnis. Then there's also the element of pure, vile meanness, to do an act which would cause genuine horror throughout the world, a universal horror, a revulsion. You see the acts, the treatment of the women, the sex, the slavery. You see the acts against the Christians, the Yazidis. They're almost calculated to be so mean that they would cause universal outrage. And now the destruction of Nimrud. And it has served its purpose. You have the whole world discussing this.
I just want to pick you up on one of the points you made. You, as a chair of Islamic Studies, we were talking about not worshipping false gods amongst several religions, but is there anything in the Quran specifically that would condone what these men are doing?
Well, let me answer your question by giving you the statement that the Muslim rulers have ruled these lands for over 1,000 years. One of the greatest Muslim dynasties, the Abbasids, ruled this area for about 500 to 700 years, gave a great world civilization. And these statues were preserved. They weren't touched, they were untouched. Similarly with the Bamiyan statues, they survived centuries of Muslim rule. And yet you have the ISIS here in Iraq, and you have the Taliban in Afghanistan in 2000 just blowing up these statues. So again, it is how they are interpreting their faith. And again, I repeat this point, that this is very much part of the Abrahamic legacy, and the interpretation, of course, depends on how Muslims are prepared to interpret the sacred text.
Professor Akbar Ahmed, we have to leave it there, but it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you very much. We do have some breaking news. We're getting reports of a shooting at a nightclub in Mali. At least 2 people are believed to have been killed at a nightclub called La